One is over types of statistical studies. There are three major types of statistical studies. We just talked about them. The first one is an observational study, which records the values of variables for members of a sample or a population. The second one is a survey. It's a type of observational study that gathers data by asking people a number of questions. And then the last one is an experiment. An experiment assigns a treatment to a specific group of people and seeing what effect that treatment has on them. And it's not necessarily people, it's a population, sorry. All right, so to avoid bias in an observational study and in surveys, it's important to select subjects randomly. Cause and effect conclusions can only be done from experiments. Cause and effect conclusions can only be made by experiments, right? It says you cannot do this with observation or survey. You can only do that with an experiment, okay? Experiments are the only things that allow us to make cause and effects conclusions. And that's exactly what the next statement says, okay? So we're going to read some examples and decide if it's a survey, an observational study, or an experiment. So Linda wanted to know if it was easier for students to memorize a list of common three-letter words, such as fly, pen, and red, or a list of three-letter nonsense words, such as VAR, ZAP, and TWQ. So I think that's ZOP. Who cares? She randomly selected 28 students from all of the 10th graders in her district. She put 14 blue and 14 red chips in a jar, and without looking, each student chose a chip. Those with red chips were given the list of common words. Those with blue chips were given the list of nonsense words. And then she gave all students 1 minute to memorize their list. After that minute, she collected the list and asked the students to write down all the words they could remember. She recorded the number of correct words recalled. What kind of study is this? Any ideas? Yeah, it's an experiment. This is an experiment. What was the treatment? Well, you had three-letter words or three-letter nonsense, right? Who do you think did better? The people that had to memorize the words or the people that had to memorize the nonsense? Yeah, I think the ones that had to memorize the three-letter words did better than the three-letter nonsense, okay? So students were randomly assigned three-letter words or three-letter nonsense words. They were given a minute, right? So I said that the variable is the number of correct words, right? That was what we were checking. What were we trying to evaluate or collect? What was our data? Our data was the number of correct three-letter chunks, whether they were words or, because she was collecting both, right? Whether they were words or nonsense. She was trying to see who did the best. And again, we don't have the results, but I would say that the words did better than the nonsense. Good job. Who was it who said experiment? Was that Angus? No. Kylie? Who said experiment? Oh, good job, Maddie. Perfect. Okay. State if the following is an observational study, a survey, or an experiment, and give reason for your answer. Ken wants to compare how many hours a week that 6th graders spend doing mathematics homework to how many hours a week that 11th graders spend doing mathematics homework. He randomly selects, I'm not grabbing the door, someone else do it, 10 6th graders and 10 11th graders and records how many hours each student spent on mathematics homework in a certain week. I did. I don't care. All right. So what is this one? Observational. Yeah. Can I just abbreviate that? Observational study. How do I know? Here's what I wrote. Students were randomly selected from two populations. No treatments were administered. And we just observed to see how many hours they spent doing mathematics. So let's see, I wrote students were selected from the two populations of interest, and that was either 6th grade or 11th grade. And then We just observed the time they spent on math homework on a certain week, because that's what it says. It doesn't tell you when, it's just on a certain week. So yeah, observational study. How do we feel about that? Okay. So if you look at the math 3 test, how it kind of groups everything together, you guys have no more than 5 questions on statistics. No more than 5. So everything that we do this week is to make sure you're prepared for those 5 questions. The no more than 5 questions. That's why we're just going to zip through it, and I'm going to do the homework with you or post it. Okay. All right. Next one. What kind of study is this? So, are we doing what kind of a study is this? Suppose that you, in your health class, you read 2 studies on the relationship between eating breakfast. Here we go. Eating breakfast and success in school for elementary school children. Both studies conclude that eating breakfast causes elementary school children to be successful in school. So first of all, let's talk about this. This is a study, right? So that means it's an observational study. And it says that it concludes that breakfast causes kids to do better in school. Are we allowed to determine cause from a study? No, we can only determine cause from an experiment. So first of all, that whole thing is crazy. But anyway, so it says, suppose that one of the studies was an observational study. Describe how you would recognize that they had conducted an observational study. So I wrote that researchers went to several schools and randomly selected students. So I'm just going to write randomly selected students. They determined if students ate breakfast or not. So maybe they watched or did a survey to determine, because remember, a survey can be part of your observational study. Determine if students ate breakfast. And then they got their academic results from, so then the researchers got academic results. Oh, God, dang it. I can't spell to save my life. Sorry. Academic results from the school to make a conclusion whether or not, so yeah, they ate breakfast and they performed better on tests. No, they didn't eat breakfast. They did a lousy job on tests. So it says, suppose that one of these studies was an experiment. So if it was an experiment, could we determine cause? Yes. But the problem with it being an experiment is, what are our 2 groups going to be? Like, what's the treatment that we give them? Some kids get breakfast, some kids don't. So if we did an experiment, how would we recognize that? Well, our treatment would be some get breakfast and some don't. And that's, again, one of those things that's probably not real ethical. Can we say that those little kids can't eat? Probably not. That's probably not real ethical. So that's all I wrote. Okay. Number 4, data from a random sample of 50 students in a school district showed a positive relationship between reading scores on standardized reading exams and shoe size. So, can it be concluded that having bigger feet causes one to have a higher reading score? Okay. So what kind of a study is this? Is this an experiment or an observational study? Yeah, this is going to be observation, and we cannot determine cause. But it's highly unlikely that the bigger your feet are, the better that your reading is. Okay. Okay, so we're going to read these problems 5 through 7, and we're going to use these scenarios. So scenario A says that researchers want to determine if there's a relationship between whether or not a woman smoked during pregnancy and the birth weight of her baby. Researchers examined records for the past 5 years because we wouldn't want to do an experiment, right? That would have treatments of women being forced to smoke or not to smoke during pregnancy. So we're just going to do kind of an observational study and look at records. The second one is a large high school wants to know the proportion of students who currently use illegal drugs. A uniformed police officer asks random sample of 200 students about their drug use. Okay. And then a company develops a new dog food. The company wants to know if dogs would prefer its new food over the competition's dog food. 100 dogs who were food deprived overnight were given equal amounts of the two dog foods, the new food versus the competitor's food. The proportion of dogs preferring the new food versus the competitor's food was recorded. So which scenario above describes an experiment and why? Yeah, C is the experiment. C is the experiment. What's the treatment? Yeah, so we all of the dogs were not given any food. That's not really the treatment. The treatment is that we were given what? Yeah, you were given different types of dog foods, given 2 types of food to see which one did best. So the choice between the new food and the competitor's food, and then their preferences were recorded. Which scenario describes a survey? Which one describes a survey? Yeah, B, that whole uniformed officer asking kids about their drug use. That's pretty good survey, right? So will the results of the survey be accurate? No. Why? Well, yeah, I would say bias. I mean, why would you answer honestly? Can I just say that? Why would you answer honestly to a uniformed police officer?
I mean, I thought that pride survey was like, we're just asked a bunch of questions about drugs and alcohol.
About drugs, yeah. In Yorktown, the sex ed teacher was a priest, and he didn't talk to any of the kids at all really about sex. Their whole survey was like how long they were going to remain abstinent and something like that. As a parent, I was like, this is the most ridiculous stuff ever. Yeah, it's good. I mean, sometimes we ask really ignorant questions. Yeah, good job. Okay, the remaining scenario is an observational study. Is it possible to perform an experiment to determine if a relationship exists? Why or why not? So this is the remaining scenario A. We don't want to do an experiment. I'm going to put no to experiment because the treatments, that's the whole smoking during pregnancy. The treatment would be dividing groups, like you would have 2 groups. One group that smoked during pregnancy. And if we're doing an experiment, like we're going to put them all in a group and say like, hey, you need to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day. And then we're going to check the birth weight of your child, right? And then one group does not smoke. That's unethical, right? We don't want to actually harm someone's unborn child by forcing them to smoke, especially if they're not a smoker. Okay. Questions? Do you guys feel okay about studies? Okay. So the types of studies: observational study, experiment, or survey. Okay. Tell me if you're still needing it. Okay, flip over. Let's talk about bias. Bias is a systematic error in measuring the estimate, favors certain outcomes, anything that causes the data to be wrong. Okay, so types of bias. Voluntary bias is people choose to respond. Usually only people with very strong opinions respond. And the way to determine voluntary bias is self-selection. Like I said, let's stand outside the Catholic Church and see what the opinion is of abortion. Sorry, I feel like I'm choking to death. Convenient sampling. Sampling people who are easy to ask can produce biased results. This method is often used for surveys and results reported in newspapers and magazines. Like, I'm going to do a survey of only the people that subscribe to my magazine or only the people that subscribe to my newspaper. Is that really an authentic survey? No. Okay. Under coverage, when some groups of the population are left out of the sampling process. I'm going to survey. I want to do a survey on women wages, but I'm only going to ask men, right? Let's see. Non-response. An individual chosen for the sample can't be contacted or refuses to cooperate. People are chosen by researchers, but they refuse to participate. Response bias is when the behavior or the respondent or interviewer causes bias in the sample. Lurking variables, variables that cause results in a study that have been taken into consideration by the experimenters or the surveys. And then wording of the question. Wordings of the question can be influenced and answers are given. So here's what I'm going to write. I'm going to write for wording questions. It says as neutrally possible. So asking emotional questions is a big wording kind of issue that you'll see. And then lurking variables. This is when you look for correlation, or cause. Kind of like, let me see which one we had up here that had a lurking variable in it. It was the, so example 3, suppose that one of the studies is observational when we talk about the relationship between eating breakfast and their success. That eating breakfast, that's a lurking variable because we're assuming that it causes kids to not do well. And kids might not do well just because they're just not academically set up to do well, right? Like maybe they're just not at that spectrum of the academic rail. Okay, flip it over. This is your homework. We're going to do this really fast. Okay. So we have to identify the source of bias. We're just going to try to underline and make little notes. So, question A: before the presidential election of 1936, FDR ran against a Republican, ALF Landon, and the magazine Literary Digest predicted Landon winning the election 3-2. The Digest survey was of 2.8 million people, and it came from the magazine subscribers, car owners, telephone directories, etc. The George Gallup surveyed 50,000 people and predicted that Roosevelt would win. So, what is the bias? Well, let's look really fast. First of all, the Digest surveyed 2.5 million, whereas the other one only surveyed 50,000 people. So, under coverage. Yep. What about the magazine? Like this Digest survey surveyed people who were subscribers, car owners, or had their name in a telephone directory. Yeah, voluntary response. Good job. And you can also put convenience if you want convenience. Okay. A survey of high school students on drug abuse uses a uniformed police officer to interview each student in the sample. So why are you not gonna? What kind of a bias is that? Yeah, it's a response bias. Who wants to be honest when that happens? You're going to conduct a survey by stopping friendly-looking people in the mall. Yep, it's a convenience survey. A restaurant conducts a survey of its customers by leaving surveys on the table. So what about all the people that don't answer it? What's that called? Yeah, non-response. Non-response. A survey is conducted by calling randomly selected names from the phone book. What if you just don't answer your phone? How many of you guys have spam, like when your phone rings and it says spam, like your cell phone? Do you ever answer those calls? I don't either. Someone just write non-response. Because we all love talking to telemarketers. Huh? Yeah, I don't even have time for it. Suppose that you want to estimate the total amount of money spent by spent by students on textbooks each semester at UNC. You collect register receipts for students as they leave the bookstore during lunch one day. So you're just you're just getting response from the kids that were in the bookstore that day. So that's convenience. What else? Yep, under coverage. Good job. You're just missing all of the people who buy books at any other time, right? Find the average value of a home in Apex. One averages the price of homes that are listed for sale. Under coverage. And you're just missing the homes that aren't for sale. A surveyor is conducting a survey outside of a local library. He's asking people to take a survey as they come into the library. Voluntary, yeah. A volunteer response. What is that called? What'd you say? Voluntary response. Yeah. What about convenience also? Convenience, voluntary response. Okay. If he's standing outside of the local library, he's just asking people that are near him. He's like not even making an effort to move away from where he is. A magazine included a questionnaire in one of its issues. The magazine is for guns and ammunition, and it's questioning about public opinion of gun control. What else? Oh, the wording of the question. I would say probably wording. I would say convenience. I would also say voluntary response. I think this could be almost all of them. It's also under coverage. What about the people who don't get that magazine, right? It's only getting the opinions of the people who buy the magazine. A theater company hands out a questionnaire about the quality of their productions. They're only interested in the people who attend the theater. What'd you say? Yeah, and I'm also putting voluntary response. Susan and Walter are getting ready for their big summer barbecue party. Not sure how many hamburgers to buy. Susan sends out a survey to all of the guests. Here's Susan's survey question. Do you want to have someone kill a defenseless animal, skin it, grab some of it, and add preservatives to it, and force me to inhale the fumes while I cry silently because it reminds me of all my Animal Farm friends when I was a child? Oh, okay. Anyway, yeah, wording. Probably very emotional, right? Wording. Last one, Walter reads Susan's question and shakes his head and sighs. He writes a new survey question and sends it out. Do you want to support local American farmers in these troubled economic times by grilling up traditional American juicy burgers? Also wording. Probably they're not having a good time right now in their relationship. I love that. Grab it, skin it, slaughter it, watch it, or whatever she said. Okay. That is the American way.